Hello everyone, and welcome to Unseen Horrors. This is a story about the night that changed everything for two families and an innocent girl who vanished. It's the chilling, true account of what happened to the Millbrook family in rural Alabama and their neighbors, the Sutherlands, as they confronted a malevolent force lurking just beyond the tree line. Their terrifying ordeal, documented on February 14, 1999, began with whispers in the dark and ended with a shocking disappearance that has haunted their community for decades. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of terror, because you never know what's waiting for you in the shadows.
Welcome to Mr. Graves' Horror Channel.
The Millbrook home sat on a plot of land that seemed to exist outside of time. A small, two-story house with a wraparound porch. It was surrounded by ancient oaks whose limbs twisted like arthritic fingers against the perpetually gray Alabama sky. The nearest neighbor was the Sutherland family, a quarter-mile down a gravel road, separated by a dense, unkempt forest that seemed to swallow the light. It was in this house, on the night of February 14, 1999, that a silence fell. A silence so profound it was its own kind of sound. Clara Millbrook, then a vibrant 23-year-old, was home from college for the weekend. She'd been enjoying a quiet evening with her parents, Robert and Eleanor, watching a classic movie on their old boxy television. The air was thick with the scent of pine and rain, and the faint glow of the television screen was the only light against the encroaching darkness. Outside, the wind howled, a lonely, keening sound that seemed to snake its way through the cracks in the walls. "I swear I just heard something outside," Eleanor said, her voice a low murmur that barely cut through the wind. She was a woman who saw ghosts in every shadow, a trait Clara had always dismissed as a part of her mother's overactive imagination. "It's just the wind, Mum," Clara replied, not looking up from the movie. But Eleanor was right. There was something else, a faint scratching sound, like a branch dragging against the side of the house. It was rhythmic, persistent, and utterly out of place. Robert, a practical man who worked with his hands, stood up and went to the window, peering into the inky blackness. "I don't see anything," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. He pulled a shotgun from the closet, an old hunting rifle that hadn't been fired in years, and placed it on the dining room table. The scratching stopped. In its place, a whisper, so low and indistinct it could have been a figment of their imagination. It was coming from the side of the house where Clara's bedroom was. A cold dread settled in the pit of Clara's stomach. She felt a prickle of unease that wasn't just fear. It was a visceral, animalistic recognition of danger. She was about to dismiss it as the wind again when the whisper sharpened. It was no longer a vague murmur, but a distinct human sound. "Clara." It was a voice that stretched her name into a distorted, agonizing shriek. It was her own voice, and yet it wasn't. Eleanor gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Robert's face paled. Clara froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. She couldn't make a sound. The voice, this twisted mockery of her own, repeated her name, and then something else. "We're here." The scratching resumed, this time at the front door. It was a more aggressive sound now, a frantic tearing at the wood, punctuated by a low, guttural growl. The doorknob rattled violently. "Robert, what is that?" Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling. I don't know," he said, his hand reaching for the shotgun. The front door slammed open with such force that the house shook. A gust of wind and rain rushed in, but no one was there. The shotgun slid from Robert's grasp, clattering to the floor. The sound was deafening. The whispering was gone, replaced by a suffocating silence. Meanwhile, a quarter-mile away, 10-year-old Lily Sutherland was fast asleep in her bed, her teddy bear clutched tightly in her arms. She was a sweet, quiet child, with bright blue eyes and hair the color of corn silk. Her parents, David and Sarah, were downstairs in the living room, enjoying a late cup of coffee. "Did you hear that?" Sarah asked, her head tilted to the side. "Hear what?" David replied, not looking up from the newspaper. "A scream. It sounded like it came from the Melbourne direction." "It's probably just the wind, honey. Old houses make all sorts of noises." But a moment later, a loud bang echoed through the night, a sound that was unmistakable. David dropped the paper and stood up, walking over to the front door. He peered through the peephole, but saw nothing but the swirling rain and the impenetrable darkness. "It sounded like a gunshot," he said, a tremor in his voice. "Maybe we should call them," Sarah said, reaching for the phone. As she did, the lights flickered and died. The house was plunged into a sudden, absolute darkness. Sarah etted out a small cry. A chill wind snaked through the house, even though all the doors and windows were closed. "David, something is wrong," she whispered. Just then, they heard a thump from upstairs, a sound like something heavy falling to the floor. Lily?" David stammered. He and Sarah raced upstairs, fumbling in the darkness. When they reached Lily's room, the door was open. The window was shattered, a broken shard of glass glinting in the faint moonlight that pierced through the clouds. Her bed was empty. The window screen, which had been securely latched, was torn to shreds, hanging from its frame. David's heart sank. He felt a terror so immense it threatened to swallow him whole. He grabbed Sarah's arm, his voice a frantic gasp. She's gone." She started screaming, a high-pitched guttural sound that was raw with grief and disbelief. David grabbed the phone, only to discover that the line was dead. He looked out the broken window and saw something in the distance, a faint light bobbing in the darkness. It was coming from the Melbrook house. He ran down the stairs, grabbing his car keys. Sarah was frozen in place, her face a mask of abject horror. He left her there, telling her he would be back with help. He ran out into the night, the rain a cold torrent against his face. Back at the Millbrook home, Clara, Robert, and Eleanor were huddled together, paralyzed by fear. The wind had died down, replaced by an even more ominous silence. The front door was still wide open, and the house was cold and damp. Suddenly, a knock, a firm, deliberate rap on the doorframe. A voice, clear and distinct,
called out. "Hello? Is anyone home? I'm David Sutherland. I live down the road. I heard a gunshot." Robert picked up the shotgun, his hand shaking. He looked at Clara and Eleanor, his eyes wide with terror. "That's not David's voice. It's too smooth, too perfect." The voice spoke again, its tone now laced with an unbearable sweetness. "We're friends. Please, let us in. We just want to talk." The voice was hypnotic, coaxing. Clara found herself slowly walking towards the door. "Clara, no!" Eleanor shrieked. But it was too late. Clara was already at the door, her hand outstretched. She looked at her parents, her eyes glassy and unfocused. "He's just trying to help, Mom," she said, her voice a hollow monotone. Just as her hand was about to touch the door, a real voice rang out from the darkness outside. "Stop! Don't let him in! It's not me!" It was the real David Sutherland, his voice hoarse and desperate. He was running toward the house, a flashlight beam dancing wildly ahead of him. Behind him, she could see a faint, indistinct shape, tall, thin, and moving with an unnatural fluidity. Clara recoiled, her senses returning to her. The voice had been a trick, a cruel deception. The figure in the doorway was not David, but something else entirely. It was a silhouette of a man, but the proportions were all wrong. Its arms were too long, its head too small. The air around it felt heavy, suffocating. Robert, seizing the moment, grabbed Clara and slammed the door shut, locking it and barricading it with the dining room table. The thing on the other side let out a frustrated growl. A high-pitched shriek, the same one that had called Clara's name earlier, echoed through the walls. "Lily!" The Millbrooks could hear David outside, his voice a panicked scream. The creature, whatever it was, had turned its attention to him. They heard the sound of a struggle, a sickening thud, and then silence. A terrified cry. "Please, no!" Then nothing. A horrifying realization dawned on Clara. The whispers, the screams, the knocking, it was all a game. A cat-and-mouse hunt. There were the mice. The creature had played them against their neighbors, and now it had them both. They heard the scratching sound, this time from the upstairs window. They had barricaded the front, but they had forgotten the rest of the house. The creature within the house. A door upstairs slammed shut, then another and another, each bang a drumbeat of their impending doom. It's hunting us," Clara whispered, her voice catching in her throat. They heard a heavy, rhythmic sodding from the hallway, footsteps, slow, deliberate, and impossibly heavy. They were coming down the stairs. "It's coming for us," Eleanor whimpered, tears streaming down her face. Robert raised the shotgun, his hands still trembling. He had to protect his family. He had to. He aimed the rifle at the top of the stairs, waiting for the monster to appear. But it never did. Instead, the house grew quiet again. A perfect, unnatural silence. The kind of silence that precedes a tragedy. From the hallway came a new sound, a quiet, innocent giggle, the sound of a little girl playing. Eleanor's head snapped up. "Lily?" she whispered. She stood up, walking towards the hallway. Clara and Robert grabbed her, but she was too strong. She had to see, she had to know. The giggle continued, now a sweet melodic sound that promised safety and peace. Eleanor rounded the corner, her face a mixture of hope and fear. And then she screamed. A sound so primal and full of agony that it seemed to tear the very fabric of reality. Clarel and Robert looked at each other, their faces filled with unutterable disbelief and horror. Then, from the darkness outside, a scream. Not a scream of terror, but a scream of pure, agonizing joy. It was Eleanor's voice, and it was coming from the depths of the forest. "She's so happy!" A chilling, unforgettable sound that will echo in their minds for the rest of their lives.